Is Mr. Bean killing the electric car industry in the UK? I'm Adam O'Brien. Let's jump in. So we've got Rowan Atkinson, aka Mr. Bean. You may know him as the goofy guy jumping in and out of, ironically, tiny little gas-powered vehicles throughout your childhood. He wrote an op-ed on The Guardian basically explaining why he feels duped by electric vehicles. And he kind of highlights, the UK and the government, they've got this ban, this proposed ban on anything that's not electric by 2030. He talks about their production and how the lithium ion batteries that they use are not that great. He talks about all this technology that's currently being pushed and kind of rushed into production and how we actually don't really have the facts. I mean, I think this is pretty typical of big government. They like to push their agenda without any facts behind them. And then voila, we've made big mistakes. We've printed more money. We've done bad things, blah, 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 blah. One thing that I find very, very interesting is that he talks about the entire life cycle of an electric vehicle versus a gas-powered vehicle, and kind of like hints towards the fact that over the entire life cycle, from like first screw into metal to it's going to the dump, how electric vehicles might actually be worse for the environment. And throughout it all, he kind of like hints at the fact that, yeah, EVs aren't actually that great. They're fast, they're fun, they're cool, there's some good tech, but he kind of says, for the average consumer, probably not that great. And like, will it be that great within the next 7 years before this ban comes in? As you might expect, he went against the common narrative. People were not very happy. We can see, funny enough, we see two different news networks here, one disclose.tv and one sky.com. But basically, Mr. Bean says electric vehicles aren't that good. Ergo, electric vehicle sales are down, and it's all his fault. Or electric vehicle sales are down because they're just not what they were promised to be. There's some limitations that we just refuse to accept as a society. And the massive narrative, which is now failing, needed a scapegoat. Those are really the two bad things that are going on in this. It's either we are completely centralized and whatever Mr. Bean says is going to be our reality, or the narrative isn't being fulfilled. This prophecy that the government has said will happen if we don't get EVs isn't being fulfilled, and we need a scapegoat. That's like really what this comes down to. But if we dive actually closer in to the story, I think we can understand a little bit more about where he's coming from, because he's in hot water. So in the article here, we've got Mr. Evans wrote, Atkinson's biggest mistake is his failure to recognize that electric vehicles already offer significant global environmental benefits compared with combustion engine cars. No, Mr. Evans, that is not what he wrote in his article. He wrote, over the entire life cycle, they might not be that great. Dare we look a little bit into the future on the Future Proof Show? And should we analyze why? Why would the government want us to have electric vehicles that are, maybe better, maybe not quite as good as they told us, good for the environment? If you have a gas vehicle, as I mentioned, you can drive very, very far distances. You can store gas quite easily in a jerry can or in other containers. It's quite easy to go long distances without the need to stop or without the need to ask anyone's permission to get more fuel, aka you can go forever without stopping because you've got gas. But in a battery situation, it's very, very difficult to store electric energy. And as a result, very, very difficult to go far with electric vehicles. So in that world, you could physically be limited from driving your electric vehicle too far. That would be very, very bad for our sovereignty and very, very bad for our ability to be free. But let's check in to see what the future folks had to say. We've got somebody here. Mr. Bean in his response. That's so good. I love that they took a Mr. Bean meme in order to respond to Mr. Bean being blamed for electric vehicles slumping. That's incredible. My goodness, his silence on climate change was deafening. Oof. I don't think he was that silent. I think he, is equally concerned with the environmental impact of vehicles. He's suggesting electric vehicles aren't the answer.
Adam, it's a joke.
Oh.
Get it? Mr. Bean, his silence is deafening.
Well, satire is very difficult to understand. From Mr. Bean's article, it says, in advance of the COP26 climate conference in Glasgow 2021, Volvo released figures claiming that greenhouse gas emissions during production of an electric car are nearly 70% higher than when manufacturing a petrol one. How so? The problem lies within the lithium-ion batteries fitted currently to nearly all electric vehicles. They're absurdly heavy, huge amounts of energy are required to make them, and they are also estimated to last upwards of 10 years. It seems a perverse choice of hardware with which to lead the automobile's fight against climate crisis. There's lots of good points there. If it's 70% higher than manufacturing a petrol one, you're starting with a massive deficit towards petrol. Now, imagine if we kept building this battery tech, and imagine if let's say in 5 years, that was no longer the case. It was only 20% higher. Then we would actually be better off just waiting those 5 years. But as always, the government rushing into these stupid decisions because they need to make some dumb political promise. I mean, if the government had never gotten involved with electric vehicles, I think that over a 25-year period, the innovation would have been a lot better. It would have taken maybe longer to get better innovation. How's that for some low time preference? Honestly, I think Elon Musk's philosophy was correct. Electric vehicles have to be fun, fast, and cool for anybody to want to buy them. Right now, we actually don't know what the true free market value of an electric vehicle is because they're full of subsidies and these like weird offhand incentives. And so, like most things that the government does, we've got some politicized, rushed climate action plan limiting and incentivizing people with actual money in a period where money is tight. And that's another reason why it's so dangerous to have governments printing money, because when they make money tight through inflation and then they give you money to do certain things, you are almost forced to do the things that the government wants you to do, whether or not you feel forced into it. If you're buying the same vehicle and one is going to give you a rebate and one won't, like, how's that for manipulating decisions? But all of that for another day. If the government wasn't politicizing this rushed climate action plan with vehicles in mind, with electric vehicles specifically, we would be far, far better off, and the innovation into batteries would be true, not subsidized with your tax dollars. Thanks so much for watching. If you want to see more content like this, make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, and don't forget to stay soft.